So, we covered a lot of different topics, man. And you said, you talked about two of the biggest, but what is the biggest? To me, it seems like politics, man. I mean, they always say it's a dirty game, but, hearing it from you, it sounds like it's bigger than what most people have any idea.
So that's the $1 million question. That's why I reached out to you, Hurt, because most of your followers, some of them have done time or they've had some kind of legal jam somewhere in their life. You've done a fantastic job of motivating a lot of people. So props, man. I'm gonna get that out of the way and get that on record and on video. Huge fan of yours. I want to bounce this off of your audience and see how they feel about this, because while this is, I was not the first to think of this. I did think of this by myself and then researched it. But let's talk about criminal prosecutions. Let's talk about something as simple as a traffic ticket, prosecuting a traffic ticket. I think there needs to be equal jeopardy. The state needs to be in equal jeopardy as the defendant in any criminal case, all the way down to a traffic violation, all the way up to a homicide. Okay? What I'm saying is, if a case is dismissed, if the defendant is acquitted of all charges, if there's a mistrial, all charges are, there's all kinds of different Latin language applied to the way a case is dismissed, but not, you know what I'm saying, right? You pay that defendant back every damn dime that they spent defending themselves from that charge. That's going to have a tremendous effect from the top all the way down to the bottom. Multiple things are going to be cured, and it's not a race thing. I can tell you this, I was accused, people get mad at me, if I'm enforcing something, I pull somebody over or whatever, and they'd say, well, you just pulled me over because I'm brown or I'm black or whatever. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to challenge anybody that thinks that to sit on the side of the road 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon and try to spot what race or nationality or anything or ethnicity that person that's driving that car is. You try to do that. You can't. Very difficult. I was a successful cop. I was a very aggressive cop. And I could not have been that way if I had targeted race. So that while there may be racist, there probably are racist. I'm not going to ever deny it. They knew better than to be racist around me. So I guess I'm kind of getting off on a tangent. I don't mean to do that. Don't think that those traffic stops are based on race. But are there things like quotas? Are there things like that? These kind of chicken shit stops, like, one of your tag lights is out. We've all heard the stories, right? Especially these highway interdiction units are pulling people over for, not having their windshield wipers on and it's sprinkling rain, or at a certain time of night based on state law. You've seen the footage. You've seen videos of these things. How do you stop that? How do you stop that? Who are the most susceptible to these chicken shit little traffic violations? People that ain't got no money.
That's right. Yeah.
Who are the most susceptible to being overly prosecuted, overly sentenced? Who are they? It's the people that don't have any money. It's not a race thing, man. It's a class thing. It's a monetary thing, I think.
So you think that's one of the reasons why in certain areas they have patrols that are more often than not, basically pulling over certain individuals just on GP, because they know that they couldn't defend themselves, rather than if you go to like a Jewish community, you're not going to see them pulling over people as often? Is that... without being I don't want to speak to what I didn't see, all right? But what I did see, I mean, you can look, be real, you not being a cop, you can look at a car and go, that's probably a rolling felony. You know what I'm saying? When you see smoke boiling out the windows, and you see that car moving side to side, can't keep it between the lines just right, you probably got something. Oh, it turns out to be a white guy, or it turns out to be a black guy. You can spot what we used to call a rolling felony.
You can see that. You develop that kind of experience. It's that sixth sense that an experienced cop has, right? Anybody, like I said, anybody that would target race for that, they're not going to be successful. They're not going to find the guns. They're not going to find the violent offender, the chomos, the ones that we want to get off the street, right? So, do I think they kind of stand back some? I think there is a lot of hesitancy shown by officers that get frequent complaints by their citizenry. That if the administration, let's say all the way up to the chief of police, takes every complaint seriously and looks into each officer, that's going to make that you're going to have two things go on there. You're going to have one, you're going to make that officer very indecisive. They're going to be afraid to stop the real bad one that comes through there. But I do believe there is some merit to the belief that the ones that can afford to defend themselves, yeah, there might be some hesitancy based on the officer's perspective of maybe putting a case on them or not. Now, I think that's a realistic thing. Did it ever stop me? Hell no.
Well, one of the things I always reflect on, and when I think about just the interaction between the police and the community, is race relations. And I know in certain communities, people have a certain stigma about the police just because of what they've been conditioned, and just having had either interaction or other people around them who have had interaction. And so it's almost as though the police have become dehumanized in a sense of, dealing with these individuals. Yeah. And when people talk about, okay, how do we change that? I think one of the biggest things that needs to be addressed is in local communities where you have, what's considered or what may seem to be an overly aggressive police presence. There should be something which kind of breaks that down to where, community feels like, hey, there has to be a sense of trust, because if you don't trust the police and you don't want to be involved with them, and then all you hear is this negative, so-and-so got shot, or this happened, or that happened, and it just builds up and it builds up and it builds up, and then you have this image. And so, I don't know why they don't have more of that, especially when you have, new officers, who come into the force. And why not create these community programs where, maybe they go into the high schools or, where all the kids are there, so they can get a feel for who's who, and you don't have these images that are on social media where, a cop in Sacramento has a little 13-year-old girl and he's got his knee on her back, or you got this little kid. These little kids, how hard is it to wrestle a little 13-year-old,
Yeah.
Why, I don't know why there isn't more of that. I don't know if that's ever been discussed. And your experience as a police officer, why they didn't have more programs like that, so you don't see a guy with dreadlocks and you think, oh, this guy's a gangster, or you're scared of him, or oh my God, a big black girl, or a big white, whatever the case may be. You have to be able to exercise some control as a police officer to know that, hey man, this is a job I chose, so therefore I can't operate in fear, and the people shouldn't fear me either. It should be some type of mutual of balance of power.
All right. There's a lot to unpack right there, being real. All right. So you talked about, so I'm going to try to go backwards a little bit based on what you laid out there, right? So let's talk about this guy in dreadlocks. Let's be real. If you see a guy in dreadlocks where nobody wears dreadlocks, are you going to give him a little more attention? Does he stand out? Let's be real. Why we never, there's nothing here that would entertain that person, or there's nothing here, you know what I'm saying? You're going to give them a little more attention. That doesn't mean you're going to stop them. That doesn't mean you're going to do anything until you can, unless you see something that gives you reasonable suspicion to believe that they're about to commit a crime, or are in the course of committing a crime, or had just committed one, right? So going back to the fundamental mission of the police department, what it's to maintain
or restore a lawful peace. And it's based on those laws that are in place. There's not, you can't look at, like, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, you can't look at race and accomplish that. You know what I'm saying? You can't look at race and accomplish that. Now, is there a divide between police and minority communities? Probably, because most of your lower income communities, a lot of them are minority, being real. But there's a lot of white people that are low income. Now, look at me. I'm as white as they get. Blue-eyed. Back before all that gray started setting in, I had blonde hair. I never had a problem in black communities. Why? Because I speak poor. I grew up poor. That's the difference. I never had a problem connecting with them. I never had a problem getting along with anyone. It could be from a trailer park. It could be the projects. It didn't matter. I could speak poor. That's the difference. I think it's more about that and less about race. It's not about looking at skin color. You see does that make sense?
Well, one of the reasons why I brought that up was because, I grew up in a pretty diverse environment, so I know how to articulate myself in situations to kind of talk, but not everybody that looks like me, talks like me, or sees the situation on how to diffuse it before it escalates, or is able to kind of like rationalize a behavior. So say for instance, you get, stopped and somebody looks at you, hey man, what's going on? Hey, blah, blah, blah. And, oh man, are you in the cars? I just happen to be, blah, blah, blah. And I could change, it softens the energy where, like you said, going up to somebody with dreads and because he looks different. But I think that's because like a lot of people culturally have not interacted with other people. So they don't have that understanding. Like I've seen a video on Ricky Williams, the football player. He was walking and they said, hey, what are you doing over here? Black guy, Texas. He wasn't, he didn't look familiar. So these guys, and then finally when he says, hey, I'm out here for the Hall of Fame, conference with Earl Campbell, and they're like, oh, you played for, oh man, we're sorry that, but it's like, dude, he was just walking.
There had no business questioning him.
Exactly.
That's the difference.
That's the difference.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. Like just knowing, when you have interactions, and because a lot of times people, once you get past the preconceived notion, like, oh man, it's just it's not, it's a fear thing. So I think like one of the reasons I would say we need to have interaction. Like if you've never had a black friend or a Mexican friend, and you said you worked in the forest, you grew up in this neighborhood, and you're looking at, okay, well, we're going to partner you with this guy so you can learn about this culture.
Right.
So that way you don't have that fear. Dreadlocks doesn't scare you or make you feel uncomfortable, and you're cool with it. It's no different than me seeing a guy I got a friend, he's bald-headed, he don't have no hair, and people used to think he's a skinhead. No, he has a skin disease, he can't grow hair, but he used to get accused of being a skinhead, and they, why are you talking about skinhead? I was like, dude, that's my friend. Yeah. So people, who don't have cultural interaction, they have preconceived notions, and then it just amplifies.
Right, and it amplifies even more when you got one party to that interaction has the arrest authority, the ability to take someone's freedom away. Now, I'm not aware of any police academy or any advanced training for police officers that does not include that type of diversity training. I'm not aware of any police academy that, for example, my class went through. I had black people, white people, we had Asians, Hispanics. These were our people. We were all cops, right? So they're getting the training on these things. They're getting, it's there. That's there. Most people, the internet became a thing after I became a cop. That's how old I am. People are interacting and communicating a lot more. I just don't think you're going to see, I don't think what you're seeing as much like probably you saw in like 80s and 90s. I don't think you're seeing that kind of alienation between the white officer that rolls into a community and is like, oh, I don't understand why that car is sitting that way, or whatever. For example, like I was saying, I speak poor, right? I understand why somebody might have a 6-inch flathead screwdriver sitting in that ignition switch. We might know it don't necessarily mean that car is stolen. It means dude's having some problems with his keys and his ignition.
I know that because I was poor. I've seen how people would rig their cars to keep them running.
Yeah.
So I didn't freak out, you know. And being perfectly honest, most of my life, I wasn't around any black people growing up. I was born in Jacksonville, Florida, but I wasn't raised. I was raised in Tennessee. There were hardly no black people around. But I saw that for what it was when I started working in the projects in black communities, minority communities. I speak poor. It's a class thing, I think. I think that's the exposure that needs to happen. The diversity, the racial diversity training is there as much as you can be, right? You look at most of your police academies, you look at most of your police departments now, they're fully integrated. You can't operate successfully unless you can operate with another race. Nobody's looking at that. I've not seen that, honestly. Mm-hmm. Now, are there examples and things that went on out on the street before I became a cop? Absolutely. You know, there's no doubt. But I've never seen anybody target somebody based on their race. Now, do cops target neighborhoods? Yes, because people that live in the neighborhoods call us down there. And because the neighborhood is out of control, there's a violent gang or there's a subset of there's somebody that's terrorizing people. That's what's brought them down there. All right. Now, we don't expect the people inside that community to step forward and put their lives at risk by saying, hell, we called them down there. We don't expect them to defend us. You know, when the media comes down and says, hey, you're profiling or whatever, we don't expect them to defend us. But as far as targeting based on race, you just don't, man. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. I'm going to say it never happened it wouldn't happen around me, that I wouldn't have blown a whistle on it. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have it. Like I said, my oath was to all people. But going back to what I was saying though, we want to check that. We want to make sure that that's not happening, right? Because I acknowledge it is absolutely a possibility. It absolutely probably is going on, has happened, right? Equal jeopardy by the state is equal to what the defendant is going through is going to stop that. Mm-hmm. It is my belief. They're going to stop those, officers from pulling people over just for that, could be a chief. Now I've seen this. Chiefs kind of come down, not so much the chief, it's usually some underling like a captain or somebody like that comes down with some wink, nod, dance around the issue of quotas. We expect officers to make 15 contacts with citizens a day. They're looking at officers talking about, and they evaluate their officers based on what they call productivity. How the hell are you going to produce shit as a cop?
Yeah.
You don't produce nothing, right?
Yeah.
A cop should be measured by the peace in their assigned areas and the things that, that they've got in control. For example, let's say it's a traffic enforcement officer. They're assigned a certain section of highway or intersections or whatever where all of the, major wrecks and people are getting killed, whatever. You see a reduction in that officer's clearly doing something right. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily an enforcement action, right? Now, and what you referred to, and I'm sorry I skipped over this before, but you're talking about these community programs with officers and making connections, making those relationships in the communities. They're there, man. They're there. You wouldn't see half the successes that you see now if those programs weren't in place. 90% of your intel from, depending on the type of community it is, comes from those officers that have made those connections, and it takes those officers with that kind of a nature to develop that trust with that community. So they're there, right? And I feel like I'm kind of skipping around, and I apologize for that.
No, that's fine. I mean, I know I dropped a lot of things in that last little, conversation. It just, these are things like I kind of think about when I think about, police interaction or just, having a level of communication to where everybody feels comfortable. And I'm, like I said, I've been arrested, I've been to prison, I've been to jail, and I'm not here talking about like, oh man, F the police and this and that, because I was doing wrong, man. I mean, shit, I'm glad I didn't get shot. I'm like, I was out of pocket. I don't sit here and try to play victim. I'm not trying to blame, oh my God, just because of this or that. No, I own them to my mistakes. And so when I sit here and have a conversation with you, it's a conversation coming from the heart to help other people get an understanding, because personally, since I've been out, man, shit, I've talked to police about car stuff, working out. I've had cops in plain clothes say, hey man, I watch your show, great job. I don't bash the police, I don't say derogatory things. I try to create an open forum to where we can have a better police action so that people are comfortable. But by all means, I mean, like you said, if there's less crime in the area, there's something going on right. Doesn't nobody want to live in just chaos.
Right.
You don't want people smoking crack in your front yard and tweakers looking through your window. I mean, dude, I don't want to have to worry about dealing with this stuff. That's what the police are for.
Right. So most of that is governed. All government is best puts on its best face when there is a system of checks and balances, right?
That's right.
Same thing with a police officer. So going back to what I was saying with equal jeopardy, all right? Think about people that have been wrongly imprisoned for 15, 20 years for a homicide they didn't commit. And it took the development of scientific knowledge like DNA, things like that, to come about for them to come out, or for them to be exonerated and released. Now, they ain't getting no money back. Right? In most cases, they're not, unless they file some kind of lawsuit.
Yeah.
Right? But let's think about what got them put in prison in the first place. Pressure to close that case.
Yeah.
Pressure to get that freaking conviction. Get somebody locked up right now.
Yeah.
All right? And it's not just that officer, it's not that detective, it's got a caseload. That detective is currently being evaluated based on their case clearance rate, right? You got your case load, what you can clear and what you can't, and then how many you clear. So what is going to be your instinct to do? You might cut a corner or two, and next thing you know, you're going to put the wrong guy in jail. I believe that has happened. It never happened in my case. Did I lock somebody up that was involved? Did I ultimately let go? Yes, sir. Absolutely. Because they were involved, but they weren't the primary actor, and if they had cooperated, we wouldn't have stepped down that road. But do I think that there have been cops that have let people walk into prison and left them there, knowing that they didn't cross all the T's and dot the I's? Absolutely. Why? Because there was probably some pressure on them, right? Then you look at that detective or that whoever. Look at the prosecutor. Prosecutors look at evidence all the time. They're in the courtroom. They know what's going to convict. They know what's not going to go, right? They know that let's say it's a hump detective. When I say hump detective, that's a piece of shit. Riding his time to retirement, right? Mm-hmm. They know that. But this hump detective caught this high profile case, right? What's that prosecutor? That prosecutor is receiving the same kind of pressure as that cop. Going, somebody needs to make me feel safe. I want somebody arrested. Somebody needs to be locked up so that the DA can be reelected this year. All right?
Yeah.
So we got to put somebody in jail. We got to make this thing stick. Make it stick. Right? How many times does that happen? We see it all the time, right? I'm going to tell you, they'll stop doing that shit, and they'll think twice before they take some weak case from some hump detective. If they think, oh shit, I might have to write a check out of my freaking budget
you're right.
back to that defendant.
You're right.
And go, you've been acquitted, so here's you're done. All right. Now what's that gonna do? Let's talk, that trickles down. All right. That prosecutor that took that case, let's say it's an assistant district attorney. They took that case. What the hell were you thinking taking a case like that? You know that you're dealing with a hump detective and looking at the evidence that this hump detective has given you, why would you continue putting this person through this shit in court? Why are you running up the expenses and legal expenses of that person's attorneys and everything else? This person's missing work. They're losing money, bail money, right? They're losing all of that defending themselves from a bullshit case. That all of a sudden that assistant district attorney is being scrutinized, going, shit, we've had to cut money because you took a friggin' shitty case, right? Then that hump detective, it rolls right back downhill. Fool, you put the wrong person in jail. Now, as it stands right now, if they put the wrong person in jail, what consequences do they have?
What's that?
None. They get aired out in the news, and then they get to argue their case, whatever. But ultimately, when that person's acquitted, as it stands now, they get their freedom. But where are they going to get? How are they going to make that money back? How are they going to make 2, 3, 4 years of income that they didn't get? However long they were in prison, they don't get it. Now, when that person is acquitted, or the case is dismissed, null pros, or a mistrial occurs, or something like that, give them every freaking dime back. All of a sudden, the court is writing freaking checks because this hump detective ain't doing his job. If he's not doing his job, where does he go? Off the freaking job, right? There's no way that won't be effective. When you start cutting into budgets, you're going to see much better performance. I've seen, I believe wholeheartedly, I've seen cops that'll write a chicken shit ticket on somebody, knowing even if they get it dismissed, they still missed a day of work to go to court. Come on, man. Guess what? You go up to court, that case gets dismissed. That whatever he missed, he can go into court. If he missed a day of work, he had to take vacation day, whatever, court's writing a check. Think about this too. Mistrials, right? Let's say on your first defense on a criminal charge, you spend, you go all out, your family's kicked in, you've got a high profile, let's say Johnny Cochran style attorney, all right? You can afford him. He's going to charge you for the hour spent on that case. Then all of a sudden there's a mistrial. That doesn't mean that the prosecutor won't come back and file charges on you. Can you afford Johnny Cochran again? Most times you can't, as it stands right now. But if the state has to kick back that money because it was a mistrial, you can have that same high-end attorney, and every defendant can invest. How many defendants have to make a decision on whether or not their family's going to eat and they're going to take a plea deal?
You're right. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You ain't got to make that choice anymore. Make the court pay you back. If you know you're innocent, if you know you didn't do it, you need to fight, and you need to get every dime you can get and get the right attorney, get the right people in there to fight for you. Now, if you know you're guilty, you're probably not going to spend all that money. You need to make that decision up front. You're not going to get that money back, right? But everybody should have the best representation that they can possibly get. They shouldn't have to rely on some, dirtbag, be real, public defender attorney. It's no offense to them, because they're dedicated people, right?
Yeah.
But let's be real. If they were successful, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing.